Our third witness is Mr. Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, an organization committed to stopping the defamation of Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. During his tenure at ADL, he has worked to modernize ADL's operations and enhance its ability to counter hate crimes. Mr. Greenblatt oversees ADL's Center on Extremism, which analyzes and monitors extremist and hate groups. Launched Never Is Now, the world's largest summit focused on anti-Semitism and hate, and created the Center for Technology and Society, which targets the rising tide of online hate and harassment. Prior to joining ADL, Mr. Greenblatt served as Special Assistant to President Obama and Director of the Office of Social Innovation. Mr. Greenblatt, welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Portman, members of the committee, and my fellow panelists, good morning. It's an honor to appear before you today to address the dire threat posed to this country by domestic terrorism and violent extremism. For more than a century, ADL has worked to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. To deliver on that mission, we've done many things, including assemble a world-class team investigating extremist threats from across the ideological spectrum. And unfortunately, those threats are on the rise. At the top of the pyramid of hate are the most extreme incidents, like what happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh almost 3 years ago. The massacre of Latinos in El Paso, Texas, that took place 2 years ago this week. The murder of Heather Heyer at the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, 4 years ago next week. The Pulse nightclub shooting against the LGBTQ community just over 5 years ago in Orlando, Florida. And as previously been noted, the attack on the Sikh Gurdwara in Oak Brook, Wisconsin that happened 9 years ago today. Over the last decade, 429 innocent victims were murdered at the hands of extremists, the overwhelming majority of whom were far right extremists and white supremacists. But we also know full well that you don't have to be an official card-carrying extremist to cause harm. The problem we see is that violence motivated by hate and anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry increasingly has been normalized. ADL researchers found that 2020 was the third highest year on record for anti-Semitic incidents since we began tracking this data in the 1970s. Of these, known extremist groups or individuals inspired by extremist ideology were responsible for 16% of the total number of incidents. That's a lot, but as I said, anti-Semitism clearly is not the sole domain of extremists. We saw this past May as the violence between Israel and Hamas escalated, a drastic and disturbing rise in anti-Semitic activity across America, including almost a dozen anti-Semitic assaults in public places like Times Square or in a boulevard in Los Angeles where people are eating dinner, or in a main thoroughfare in Las Vegas, and attacks on Jews simply walking down the street. And this isn't Germany in 1931. We're talking about the United States in the year 2021. But this matters not just because of what's happening to the Jewish community. As I've said before, and I'll say it here again, very often hate might start with the Jews, but it never ends there. Bigotry begets more bigotry. Hate leads to more hate. For example, between March 2020 and this past February, the Asian American and Pacific Islander community experienced nearly 3,800 incidents of hate, 11% of which were physical assaults. And the FBI data showed anti-Latino hate crime rose nearly 9%. So why is the threat on the rise? To boil it down, we believe that this movement has been fueled by two catalysts. The first are leaders who have repeated extremist rhetoric, co-opted their agencies, and knowingly or not have given them the green light. And make no mistake, this is coming from some who have had the highest levels of office and also from people in positions of authority across the ideological spectrum. Neither side is exempt from intolerance. Second, social media. It is a super spreader of hate. You can find it with just a few clicks right from the phone. Intolerance is increased and amplified by algorithms that invisibly use users further down the rabbit hole of radicalism. It's all unacceptable. We've been urging at ADL, pushing the tech agency to take meaningful action for years, simply to enforce their own terms of service, but they failed to do so. That's why we've also called on policymakers like you to finally hold them accountable for their role in enabling the spread of extremism. Deep and dramatic reform of Section 230 is essential to this process because the law should not exempt them from accountability for from their product and services. The time for action against the extremist threat is now. We need an all-hands-on-deck approach from government and really a whole of society strategy to combating domestic terrorism and violent extremism. That's why ADL has created a framework. We call it the PROTECT Plan, to mitigate these threats while safeguarding civil liberties. There's a lot more detail on this in my written testimony. Happy to speak to it during the question and answer session. But we believe these steps can have an immediate and significant impact in countering domestic terrorism. More so than any single action or policy or law, there is simply no silver bullet. Now, we were glad to see that the administration recently released the first ever national strategy to counter domestic terrorism, which closely actually tracks to our plan. But today I'm here to urge you to do your part in implementing these strategies and to meet the moment. As part of this, you need to rethink DHS for the modern era, making sure it's best prepared and organized to address the threat of domestic terrorism. And I know it's somewhat beyond this committee's jurisdiction, but again, I would implore you to strive for Congress to take serious action against the social media companies. Members of the committee, as you work to address the concerns around domestic terrorism and violent extremism, we urge you to remember that the way these threats tear at the very fabric of our communities and our country. Ultimately, this is not a Democratic problem or a Republican problem. It's an American problem. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Greenblatt.